Welcome to Finding Grace. Sorry it's a little bright back there, but I figured the sun is with us this morning. So, yeah, the filming on this part, I'm going to have to figure something out so that it's not so bright. But either way, it shouldn't bother you too much. You can listen and follow along in your own Bible. So, we are in chapter 20. Just a reminder, I like the Interlinear Bible, Hebrew, Greek, and English. It's an awesome translation, right? All right, so let's get into the word, chapter 20. Just a reminder, it wasn't, Jesus made men at the end of the days literally bird food. That was the last chapter we ended up reading. And it's interesting that I guess like certain people didn't go into the lake of fire. You know, everybody thinks that hell is one situational place and everybody, is punished that same way, but different in the ending depending on how severe I think their turning away from Christ was the severity of the punishment that they received. So anyway, let's begin in chapter 20. And I saw an angel coming down out of heaven, having the key of the abyss and a great chain on his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon and the old serpent, who is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and threw him into the abyss, and shut him up, and sealed over him that he should not still lead astray the nations until 1,000 years are fulfilled. And after these things, he must be set loose a little time. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And the souls of the ones having been beheaded because of the witness of Jesus, and because of the word of God, and who had not worshipped the beast, nor its image, and had not received the mark on their forehead, or on their hand. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead did not live again until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is the one having part in the first resurrection. The second death has no authority over these, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and will reign with him 1,000 years. So that was an interesting, the only thing I really it's all interesting, noting that he went to the beast and he's going to keep him chained up for 1,000 years. But those, who do not worship or take the mark of the beast, they're resurrected, what they call in the first resurrection. So death really doesn't have its sting like the second death, like the second death would be, I believe, a final death, right? It's the, if you think about it, we die, and then if there's a second death, we physically die here on earth. This is considered, this can be considered a resurrected death, right? One you can come back from. The second death is much worse, and he'll talk about that. And whenever the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be set loose out of his prison, and he will go to mislead the nations in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to assemble them in war, whose number is as the thousands of the sea. Whose number is the sand of the sea. And they went up over the breadth of the land and encircled the camp of the saints and the beloved city. And fire from God came down out of heaven and burned them down.
And the devil, leading them astray, was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet were. And they were tormented day and night forever and ever. Okay. And so who's in the lake of fire? The devil, the false prophet, those who were with the devil leading those astray. They were thrown into the lake of fire. And those are the ones who will be tormented forever and ever. It was the beast, the devil, and the false prophet. Its own trinity, which I thought was interesting, because the devil always tries to mimic Christ. And so I feel like here he is mimicking the Trinity. Also, Gog and Magog. Gog basically means mountain. Okay. And basically the prophecy is that a king, Gog, comes from the north to attack Israel. That's what he's saying. And I think it's really interesting that Russia is at the north of Israel. And they are trying to get Ukraine, which is north of Israel. So, I just see like that lining up and aligning of the nations and exactly what Christ is talking about. Magog is known as a covering. The word means literally covering. What its definition is an anti-Christian party, a foreign nation. And again, as you see, as times come, it's weird, but we're losing our privileges, right? We're losing the privileges to be able to be ourselves, to be human, to be able to practice religion, to be able what sexuality or marry who we want. In America, we're losing those rights. And I think that's important because, to me, I think one of the greatest deceptions is that you have this group of people who are Christians who are not being very good Christians. And so, unfortunately for other people, what they see, they don't see that as a good example. They see that as, why should we love Christ when we see all this judgment coming out of the Christian church? And the judgment is not for the Christian church. The judgment is strictly for God. Christ doesn't even judge us. God is the judge. And when we're talking in Revelations, why you see the depth of, devastation, destruction, he's talking about that because this is God in his final judgment state. He is judging man after looking back at 2,000, however long I should say even more longer than 2,000 years. I was saying since he's been looking since, Adam and Eve were placed on this earth. He's looking back at all the prophets since the beginning. And then he's judging that over the earth now. So it's just an interesting thing that, you have these places are real and they mean things. And so either way, so Gog and Magog. You can look that up. Let's go into verse 11. And I saw a great white throne, and the one sitting on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled, and a place was not found for them. And I saw the dead, the small and the great, standing before God. And scrolls were opened, and another scroll was opened, which is the scroll of life. And the dead were judged out of the things written in the scrolls, according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead in them. And they were each judged according to their works. And death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And if anyone was not found, having been written in the scroll of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Okay, so here he talks about, the scroll of life, right? The dead will be judged according to their works, which is referred to as the second death. So those that haven't gone into who haven't been risen in the resurrected first death, right? to me, that's a Christ-like death, meaning we can be resurrected from it. But this second death, if our names are not written in that scroll of life, then anyone, it says, not found in that scroll is also thrown into the lake of fire. So, all righty. I think that's all in that chapter. I was trying to look to see if there was anything else that I wanted to talk to you about this one. Yeah, I did think it was interesting that Death and Hades were both thrown into the fire, so they're destroyed. And it also just reminds me of the verse when heaven and earth may pass away, or Jesus says heaven and earth might pass away. I believe it was Jesus who said that. But my words will never pass away. They will never go away. So just remember that. That's why these words are so comforting to me, because, you know, his word does mean something to me. He has been there for me, and he has been consistent in my life. And that consistency, the more I get to know him, the more at peace I am, the more, you know, it's not like I get to the point where it's like some people are so, I don't think they just don't want to believe. Like some people I know are very good friends of mine, and I know that they believe in Christ, but also they feel like they're not strong enough. Their will is not strong enough to follow Christ, right? Because you have to exercise certain will powers. You have to not put yourself first all the time, and you have to put him and other people first. And that's difficult, you know, especially when we want to do our own things, you know, and we're trying to do our own things. But you know, the gift and the grace that God has given me is so beautiful, because the more obedient I am to him, the more he gives me exactly what I've been looking for and didn't even know it, you know, sometimes. And sometimes, you know, it's exactly what I've been looking for or trying to do or accomplish. And the next thing you know, it's done. And it's with ease and with grace. And I don't have to work for it. Remember, when God works, when God is working, you rest, sit back. One of the biggest things he often says in the Bible is rest, do not fear, rest, do not fear. He says those over and over and over again. Because if you're working, guess what God's doing? Resting. You both can't do the job at the same time. He does not want you doing his job. You know, if you want to do it, then you're going to do it the way you do, and you're going to get the results that you do. But if you place it in God's hand and trust him, that's the hard thing. Some people put it in his hands, but then go, it didn't work, or he's not going to do it for me, or whatever, if it doesn't work right away. Sometimes faith comes very quickly. Sometimes things refer that faith really quickly. Sometimes a long time. Sometimes it takes years for certain faiths to develop. And those are deeper faiths and deeper truths. So continue to walk in faith, continue to walk in love. I pray today that you go in peace. But don't forget to do the communion. I'm getting ready to go in and take my communion very shortly. I usually wait. It's interesting. I usually wait for my wife to wake up to take communion with her, because I like for us to take communion together. But I'd like to do a couple of communions live online, maybe. If anyone's interested, let me know. Okay. All right, y'all. Well, you know what? Be of good cheer. Be lighthearted. Share kindness with others, and let them know grace of God is awesome. So kind. So easy. It's really not as hard as we make it. So blessings and peace be with you, my friends. Okay, ciao.